When the announcement came that All Elite Wrestling's cable television home was none other than TNT, the obvious responses came. Well, they have to hold it in the Mall of America, said some. I hope the opening match is Jushin Liger versus Brian Pillman Jr., quipped others. And who will make the surprise defection from WWE, some wondered. Clearly, the very first episode of WCW Monday Nitro left a lot of indelible memories for fans of the era. The premiere of AEW's TNT shows comes 24 years after WCW put up its dukes against WWE via its own foray into Monday nights, hitting the airwaves on September 4th, 1995. Unopposed by Monday Night Raw due to US Open tennis coverage in WWE's time slot, Nitro had a single hour to shake the audience to its core. And when all too recent WWE performer Lex Luger appeared during the telecast, shockwaves rumbled through the viewership. As AEW gets ready to create some more tremors of their own, let's look back to the creation of that seminal TV series, the one that started the Monday Night Wars, and learn a little bit more about WCW Monday Nitro's origin story. I'm Sam from Cultaholic.com, and here are 10 things you didn't know about the birth of WCW Nitro. Join us. Number 10, a tale of two networks. When it was revealed that AEW looked to be headed for a network from the Ted Turner family, only two choices made sense: TNT and TBS. Both housed WCW programming in the company's lifetime, with TBS airing wrestling cards going back to the 1970s. TNT didn't get into the game until Nitro's birth in 1995, and as it turns out, there's a pretty good reason for it: the perception of the two networks. TNT was viewed as the prestige network, airing high-quality miniseries and movies as well as NBA and NFL games, while TBS was a little bit more blue-collar with its wrestling and contemporary films aimed at low-brow audiences. The idea of having wrestling on TNT was absurd to everybody working for Turner, except of course billionaire Ted himself. In his bid to bring WCW to WWE's level, he authorized the Monday Night Wrestling show to be aired not on TBS, but rather TNT, which came as an apparent shock to his closest confidants. But Turner was deadly serious about turning around WCW's fortunes and saw TNT as the appropriate launching pad for the needed rise. Number 9, explosive name. There's been a long-held belief from some folks that the name Monday Nitro was meant to sound like Monday Night Raw, because if you say Night and Raw close enough to each other, it sounds like Nitro, or more like Nitro, or some horrid mispronunciation of the word. It's an interesting little conspiracy theory, and who knows, there may be a little truth to an attempt at subliminally creating a similar handle to WWE's product. But there's actually a more logical explanation for how Nitro earned its name. Credit for the name WCW Monday Nitro goes to Turner VP of Public Relations Jim Weiss. At the time, TNT broadcast NFL football games on Sunday nights during the first half of the season, and part of the promotional tagline for those Sunday evening games was the phrase Sunday Nitro. Weiss suggested that they carry the Nitro buzzword over to tie it in with their established piece of the NFL pie. Thus, it would create something of a Nitro double bill, with hard-hitting football on Sundays and equally exhilarating wrestling on Mondays. Number 8, Imperfect Storm. One of the hallmarks of those early Nitro years was the opening montage. You remember it, a darkened cityscape is suddenly illuminated with lines of flames and bursting fireballs, while Hulk Hogan and other familiar faces are superimposed in highlight reel form upon the buildings. Between the awing pyrotechnics and pulse-pounding music, Nitro felt like an absolute event from its first steps forward. Clearly, this was not your daddy's southern fried wrestling. This was something totally different out of Turner's camp. The montage was filmed at Disney in Orlando with the aid of a miniaturized set of buildings and a backdrop that looked like downtown New York. With about a month to go before Nitro's premiere, the crew went to film the opening, but there was a bit of a major problem. Hurricane Erin had cut through the area in early August, and the entire set had been wrecked by the storm. Eric Bischoff had to personally authorize the spending of $50,000 to repair everything. But in the end, they were able to film that badass intro that remained a Nitro staple for several years. Number 7, Mall Madness. Adding a unique aesthetic to the first episode was its location. The event was held in Minneapolis's Mall of America, which upon its opening in 1992 became the largest shopping mall in the United States and is currently the 12th largest in the world. There was something pretty cool about seeing random stores in the background while Jushin Liger and Brian Pillman exchanged fast-paced maneuvers, and its memory as a wrestling venue has endured for a quarter century. So why was that building chosen? Well, according to Eric Bischoff, he selected the building in part due to some controversy. A Minnesota native, Bischoff knew the background story of the Mall of America, which was built upon the grounds where the since demolished Metropolitan Stadium, home of Minnesota's Twins of baseball and Vikings of football, once stood. There was a proposal to build the Twins' new stadium adjacent to the mall, but the new landowners refused to allow a sporting venue on or around its site. And there were apparently some hard feelings in the entire situation. It may not have been a nationally known controversy, but Bischoff knew it himself, and to him, that made the mall an eclectic choice of host venue. Number 6, here comes Mongo. You can't bring up the very first Nitro without mentioning the very first broadcast team. Eric Bischoff put himself into the trio over veteran lead voice Tony Schiavone in an attempt to give the show a different vibe. Bobby the Brain Heenan's place on the team was assured, as you needed at least one seasoned announcer, but you also needed a recognizable and established comedic presence that would anchor the group, and that brings us to one Steve Mongo McMichael. McMichael had just wrapped up his long and successful football career less than a year earlier, and aside from a brief time with WWE as part of Lawrence Taylor's entourage, he had little to no wrestling connections. And that's partially why Bischoff chose the unique vocal stylings of Mongo, to have somebody off the beaten path that was unlike any other wrestling announcer. McMichael, meanwhile, revealed years later that he took the gig because he knew that he was going to miss being in front of wild crowds now that he was retired from the gridiron. Thus, being a wrestling announcer and later an unlikely horseman could fill that void. Number 5, severance package. No moment from the Nitro premiere stands out more than Lex Luger's shocking return to the company. Luger's peaceful disruption of the Sting vs. Ric Flair match dropped everybody's jaw, including Vince McMahon and virtually everybody else associated with WWE. As far as they all knew, Vince counted among them, Luger was still under WWE contract, and had appeared at SummerSlam just 8 nights earlier. In fact, Luger had just wrestled the night before for WWE, teaming with Shawn Michaels against Owen Hart and Yokozuna in the main event of a WWE live event in Eastern Canada. Luger had been working without a WWE contract for some time, which his bosses astonishingly weren't aware of, and he let his good friend Sting know this. Sting reached out to Bischoff, who didn't care for Luger but knew that a huge surprise like a monumental defection could put Nitro on the map. In negotiating with Luger, Bischoff gave 2 unshakable demands. To prove he was a team player, Luger had to accept a lowball contract, and he could not give any notice to Vince whatsoever. Luger, of course, agreed, never breathed a word of his exit to anybody, and his Nitro appearance was the surprise it was intended to be. Number 4, forever rivals. Luger's return overshadowed what would be a main event caliber match in most other circumstances: Sting versus Ric Flair. 2 undisputed pillars of WCW facing off 7.5 years after their legendary battle at the very first Clash of the Champions was a fitting addition for that inaugural Nitro. And as an aside, fittingly, it was Sting and Flair that turned off the nights on Nitro and WCW when they faced off on the final match in company history in March 2001. At this stage of the game, however, Sting and Flair weren't even feuding. Flair was in the midst of an issue with longtime friend Arn Anderson, while Sting, the United States champion, battled with random challengers such as Lord Steven Regal, Meng, and Bunkhouse Buck. In fact, this was the first time Sting and Flair had faced off in a televised one-on-one match in 14 months since they'd last battled on WCW Saturday Night in July 1994. But Flair-Sting, like the other matches on that Nitro, was between men that had faced each other many, many times before, so there was no need to worry about chemistry between the workers on the first show. Number 3, fighting words. In the main event, WCW World Champion Hulk Hogan defeated former WWE nemesis Big Bubba Rogers, aka the Big Boss Man, in a fairly basic match. But that was simply the prelude to a huge tease. After Dungeon of Doom members attacked Hogan in the post-match, Luger hit the ring to make the save and helped Hogan clean house. As the last men standing, Hogan and Luger locked eyes, and this led to a challenge for next week's Nitro, pitting a taped Raw against the first ever Hogan vs. Luger match for the WCW title. But there was a commercial break between the Luger save and the actual challenge in order to build suspense for what lay next. It was during that ad break that, according to Guy Evans' book Nitro, Luger apparently broke kayfabe by no longer acting intense and combative toward Hogan, instead demonstrating out-of-character calmness and nonchalance. Hogan, not somebody to stand for this, apparently gave Luger a wake-up call by growling very real threats at him, telling Luger, "Wipe that grin off your face or I'll knock it off." Luger reportedly tried to apologize backstage for the kayfabe breach, but an angry Hogan apparently just brushed him off. Number 2, an epic encounter. Luger versus Hogan being signed for the following week's Nitro, when 45 minutes earlier the majority of the world had no idea that Luger was even with WCW, was the sort of shock and awe that Bischoff loved having in his arsenal. Bischoff was able to take advantage of the unopposed time slot by telling fans that a historic match was on tap for next week, making for a highly anticipated second episode of Nitro. As it turns out, Bischoff did have in mind a major world title bout for that second show, but Luger was not part of that plan. According to Bischoff, the match was originally supposed to be Hogan defending against would-be War Games teammate and occasional rival, Vader. That fell through when Vader was suspended for his role in a backstage fight with Paul Orndorff the previous week, which subsequently led to his exit from WCW. And Luger would go on to fill in for Vader on several fronts, including the run-in at the end of the premiere, in the title match with Hogan, and on Hogan's War Games team as a possibly untrustworthy teammate. And number 1, by the numbers. Even in WWE's darkest hour, WCW had never been seen as a threat to them. They were the Pee-wee Redneck League, whereas WWE was distinguished and celebrated. Pitting Nitro on Monday nights across from Raw was viewed as a suicidal move. And Bischoff's goal to turn a profit by the end of '95, which WCW had never done in the 7 years since Turner bought the deed, was laughed at by critics and even his own peers within the Turner structure. But the laughter subsided when the ratings came in the next day. The unopposed show did a 2.9 TV rating, equating to around 2.75 million viewers. Coupled with the Luger surprise, Nitro had an audience. And as the following week proved, they were the hotter ticket, as the Luger-Hogan showdown beat Raw's warmed-over taped fare by approximately 280,000 households in their first head-to-head meeting. Raw did win the September 18th battle by a slim margin of just under 100,000 homes, but WCW through Monday Nitro proved that it had the power to hang with the big boys, as WCW, per its new mantra, had become the place where the big boys played.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you like what we do here at Cultaholic, you can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/Cultaholic. And no matter what you do, don't ever forget to hit subscribe and join us.